Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my July wrap-up. As always with these, let me start with the stats. I read 9 books in the month of July for a total of 3,685 pages. Out of those, 4 of them were borrowed and 2 of them were arcs. Obviously not my best arc month, but at least I read some, which is better than I can say for other months that I've had this year. I really need to do better about it, but we're trying. We're doing our best. In terms of my series, also not great because I started 4 new series this month. Only 3 of them were continued, but I did read 2 standalones, so that is, that's something, I guess. I did start more series than I didn't. I don't know. It's a work in progress. I'm a work in progress. As far as how I read the books, I read 1 completely physically, 1 completely on audio, 4 solely in ebook form, 2 both physically and in ebook form, and 1 I read as an ebook and as an audiobook. My genres were a little all over the place, but I did read 4 fantasies, 4 romances, and 1 sci-fi. It's pretty on par for me. Those are my main 3 categories almost all the time, so this probably doesn't come as a surprise to anybody. I did end up splitting fantasy and romance pretty much in half. It is the only thing getting me through a reading slump and not burning myself out further in terms of all of the fantasy books that I usually read. Again, though, I had a really good month in terms of rating, and honestly, I think it's just because I'm really getting a lot better at picking the books that I know will appeal to me. So 3 of them were 5 stars, 5 of them were 4 stars, and only 1 of them was a 3 star. I'm gonna call that a win. As far as the age ranges go, 6 of them were for adults and 3 of them were for young adults. Alright, so let's jump into the books that I read. I started my month with Flamefall by Rosaria Munda. I've put this on several TBRs and have not gotten around to it for literally no reason at all that I can decipher. That is reflected in the fact that this ended up being a 5-star read for me. So yeah, I loved this, and I immediately moved on to my Arc of Fury song, which is book 3, which I was fortunate enough to get from NetGalley, and I loved that too, but I will get to that in just a moment. So if you don't know what this is book 2 in the Aurelian cycle, Aurelian trilogy? Aurelian... I don't know what the series name is called. It follows 2 characters, Annie and Lee, and it's a little bit of an Anastasia story. I mean, like a gender-bent Anastasia. But she actually compares it a lot more to Plato's Republic, I believe, the author does. She has a really strong educational background in, I think, poli-sci or something along those lines. But anyway, the first book, you follow Annie and Lee. They grew up together as orphans in an orphanage, and you quickly find out that one of them is a long-lost heir to the royal family that had been overthrown, and this is kind of the time after a revolution in which things are kind of straightening themselves out, but not necessarily going fantastically, I guess you could say. This takes place many years after the actual overthrow happened, and Annie and Lee are both dragon riders now, and dragon riders are considered some of the most prestigious people in the entire country of theirs, but it used to be a role reserved only for the highborn or like the dragonborn kind of group, and not for commoners or peasants, I guess you could say, of which as orphans technically they are. But you just kind of follow their characters, and there is a little bit of a love story, and there is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and emotions, and just the first book, I read it in like a day, maybe a day and a half, and it made me cry. The second book, I also read it in a day, maybe a day and a half, and it made me cry. And I can tell you right now that the third book did not just make me cry, but it made me sob like a very small child. Flamefall, 5 stars. Absolutely adored it. This entire trilogy is cemented as one of my favorites, especially one featuring dragons. The politics going on, the themes that they're exploring with all of the themes that they're exploring with the politics that are going on, kind of exploring what happens. There's not really a right side, if that makes any sense. It's so good. The relationship is so good. I loved it. So then I read Fury Song, which I already talked about, which is book 3, which I can't tell you anything about what happens in because I don't want to spoil it for you, and you really do need to read these if any of that sounded remotely interesting. Fury Song also got a 5 stars, and Fury Song made me bawl my eyes out. Like I said, I was lucky enough to have an arc of it. I don't know when it actually comes out. It might come out later this month, or if it came out, it might have come out at the end of July, actually. Scratch that. I think it came out at the end of July. So you can go and binge the entire 3-book series all on your own and love it just as much as I do, because it's technically YA, but it does not feel like your stereotypical YA, and you're just going to fall in love with every single one of these characters. Your heart's going to break for them. You're going to feel betrayed. You're going to feel every emotion that they felt. It's heart-wrenching. The series is heart-wrenching and emotional and amazing, and just please go read it. The next book that I did pick up in the month of July was another arc after Fury Song, and that was Dead Man's Hand by James J. Butcher. If that name sounds familiar to you at all, that is because he is Jim Butcher's son, Jim Butcher of Dresden Files fame. I have read all of the Dresden Files books. I have been reading all of the Dresden Files books since I was 12 years old, maybe? That sounds about right. And I figured why not check out his son's book too. It was on NetGalley and it sounded interesting, so I wanted to read it. It was okay. I think I ended up giving it 4 stars. It felt tonally kind of similar to the Dresden Files. So you follow Grimsby, who is so it follows this urban fantasy world in which there are witches and there are, like, the Fae world, the Elsewhere kind of a thing. Witches have the ability to become, I think it's called an auditor, which is kind of like magical cops. That's the sense that I got of it. It's like the supernatural division of the police force. And this character, Grimsby, that's all he's ever wanted to do his entire life was to become an auditor. However, he had an accident as a child, and that made his magic kind of unreliable, and he really struggled as he was going through the exams to become an auditor. And he ended up getting written off. And then he ended up working at... It's kind of like a magical... Chuck E. Cheese, I guess you could say. It was Magic Donald's something Emporium Pizza. I don't remember the name of it. But there's a castle, and he puts on, like, magical shows for kids' birthday parties, and they serve terrible food, and there's, like, a ball pit and a moat and, like, a whole bunch of stuff. So he's an entertainer there, pretty much. He puts on, I think, like, a fairy costume at one point, and that's what he performs in. And there was also something about taco-shaped wings, and he entertains the kids using his magic in that manner. But his life is interrupted when the woman who wrote him off as an auditor and said he would never be able to do it, and therefore kind of crushed all of his hopes and dreams, turns up murdered. She's one of the most, like, prestigious and powerful witches in existence, I guess, and she died a terrible, terrible death. And her former partner, whose name is escaping me, Mayflower, I think his name is Mayflower. He also goes by the Huntsman. He's a very grim, gruff character that's been through a lot of shit, and you can tell that he's been through a lot of shit, but you don't really get his perspective for a lot. Most of the book is told through Grimsby's point of view. He was the dead woman's former partner, and he would like to find out who killed her, and he discovers a code that she had written in her last moments that essentially points him in Grimsby's direction. So they kind of team up to try and figure out what she was trying to tell them and who killed her and all of that stuff. It's a magical murder mystery. There's a lot of stuff that happens. It was entertaining. I did laugh out loud several times. I don't think it quite has the touch that the Dresden Files does, but I don't know that it's necessarily trying to. Like, just because it's his son doesn't necessarily mean that he's trying to follow exactly in his footsteps. I gave it 4 stars. It was an entertaining read. I will be very interested to see where he goes next, and I think that he'll probably follow those same 2 characters for a while, but we'll see. The next book that I read is up in a corner, so I'm not going to hold it up for you guys, but I'll pop a picture of it over here, and that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is a reread for me. We had a plane trip a couple of weeks ago, and it was the only audiobook that I had already downloaded. I wanted something that I could listen to, that I had read before, that I could fall asleep to and not miss anything if I fell asleep on the airplane. Project Hail Mary won. And you know what? It was just as amazing for the reread as it was the first time around. I adore that book. It was still 5 stars. I loved it even more this time, I think you could say. The characters, the science aspect, y'all know I love any kind of science in my books, especially if it's legitimate, and the science in that, outside of the certain things that happen, if you have read that book, you know what I'm talking about, that have not yet been proven. Outside of that, the science is spot on. So I absolutely adore Project Hail Mary. I really don't need to go into it very much more. Everybody talked about it last year. It was my top book of last year. It's not going to be my top book of this year because I don't want to put a reread up as that, but if I did, it would be, honestly. The next book that I picked up, also on the airplane, was The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This is a romance, pure, fluffy bodyguard famous person, like celebrity romance. Kind of gender swapped though, because he is the famous actor and she is the bodyguard. She kind of gets assigned to his personal detail and ends up having to protect him because there is a credible threat against him. And they fall in love, and it's adorable. You've got bodyguard romance, you've got celebrity romance, you've got forced proximity, you've got the single bed trope, you've got... I think that covers everything, actually. I don't know. I think that's the majority of it. But if that hits anything for you, as it should, this was a fun, really quick read. I read it in a day. I read the majority of it on the airplane, and I loved it. I ended up giving it 4 stars because, like, I love all of those tropes, and some of them I just felt like they weren't executed as well as I would have loved, but... you know, it's fine. It was a cute, fluffy read. It was a quick read, and I enjoyed every single second of it. So it was 4 stars. If that sounds interesting to you, definitely pick it up. Next, I also picked up this as an audiobook on that same airplane trip, and that is Blade of Secrets by Trisha Levenseller. If you've already watched my August TBR, you saw me talk about Master of Iron, which is the second book in this duology. I had been contacted by the publisher saying that I was going to be receiving a finished copy of the second book in this, Master of Iron, and I had not read the first one. And I thought that that was probably something I should do if I was going to be reading the second one sometime soon. So I got the audiobook of this, and I listened to most of the audiobook. I think I also listened to a little bit of... I think I also read this via ebook, because I didn't have a physical copy of it yet. And this was a fun time. This was a really cute YA. It's like a feel-good YA. I mean, some terrible stuff happens in it, don't get me wrong. But you follow Ziva, who's like a master blacksmith. She's becoming a renowned weapons craftsman for somebody of her age, which is only 18, because she has this magical ability to imbue the weapons that she creates with some kind of magical ability on their own. There's a spear that always hits a target. There is a blade that turns black if your enemies or if somebody like near you means you harm. Like, it's things like that. It's a very specific ability, but every single one of the weapons she makes has one. However, a warlord ends up trying to recruit her against her will, so I guess it's more like kidnap her, and have her exclusively make weapons for her army, and Ziva does not want to do that, so she and her sister and a couple of other people that I will not disclose end up going on the run, trying to get away from this particular warlord. And that's the extent of it. It has a cute little romance going on that was enjoyable. It has really, really good social anxiety rep. It was pretty relatable if anybody has like any kind of anxiety or social anxiety. Ziva has anxiety, and you can tell, and they talk about it. I mean, they're not trying to hint around that fact. They talk about it within the book, and it was really, really good. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see what the second book has to hold. The next book that I read was an MC romance called Wreck and Ruin. I don't remember what the author's name is, but obviously I'll pop the picture up over here. This was okay. It was kind of forgettable, honestly. I don't remember the main characters' names. I don't remember the author's name. I remember that it's an MC romance in which she is a bartender, and she's trying to stop a guy from hitting on her while she's at work, so she walks up to a different guy and says, "Pretend to be my boyfriend, please," and he kisses her, and they kind of go from there. She finds out that he's the president of a local motorcycle club. She's a little bit hesitant about getting involved with that, but then she finds out that for reasons that happen in the plot, there's a different motorcycle club that wants to kill her, so she goes to him for protection. And then he falls in love with her very, very quickly. And they're in this forced proximity, he wants to protect her kind of situation. She ends up living in his house. It was steamy. I liked that aspect of it, and it was cute, and it had a happy ending. I liked all of those aspects of it, so I ended up giving it 4 stars. But outside of that, it wasn't super memorable. It's not something that I think I'll ever reread. And following that, I actually picked up another romance. Both of these romances were TikTok recommendations. I think I need to stop taking them. It's just not working for me. Wreck and Ruin got 4 stars. It wasn't that bad. I didn't really have any glaring issues with it. The next one is called... Ember is here, in case you couldn't tell. The next one is called Fractured Freedom. And this is a brother's best friend, but also mafia romance, which I wasn't expecting. Dark mafia romance, essentially. And again, I don't really remember the main characters' names in this either, but the main character had tricked her brother's best friend that she thought that she was in love with into taking her virginity when she was like 19 years old. And after that, they like drifted apart. And 5 or 6 years later, I think, she is in Puerto Rico, um, working as a nurse in a hospital there. And her sister, who was kind of the family black sheep, was visiting her, but they both ended up getting arrested because her sister was smuggling drugs in her luggage as they were flying home. So they both end up getting arrested, and the sister calls the brother's best friend to get them out for reasons that you would see in the book. He's like in the military or something. And so that's how he comes back into her life. And then you find out that he's actually like an heir, not maybe an heir, but a member of a mafia family. And that was kind of unexpected for me. Like, it wasn't just the sweet brother's best friend military romance that I thought I was getting into. It was not sweet. I mean, it had its sweet moments, but like, it also had its interesting, steamy, dark romance moments that I was not anticipating. It had some glaring issues, a lot of plot holes that I didn't really understand. I didn't really understand why they thought that just because she looked like her sister, she was in some kind of terrible danger from the people that the drugs were stolen from. It's a whole thing. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Again, not particularly memorable, probably not going to be on any favorites list that I have, but not going to be on any worst lists either. And then the very last book that I read was Almost Heaven by Judith McNaught. My battery's about to die, so I have to talk really, really fast. This is a romance that I read when I was a lot younger, and I really, really enjoyed it. It's Regency romance. I don't really need to explain any more than that. It's really, really entertaining, but it's also mostly nostalgic for me, so it ends up being a 4-star read just because I don't necessarily know that it's particularly good, but I love it all the same. But this is one of my favorite go-to Regency romance reads, which I picked up because I had just watched Persuasion on Netflix and it wasn't doing it for me, so I wanted something I knew I would enjoy. Last but not least, I have an honorable mention of The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. I am probably more than 50% of the way through this book at this point. I picked up the audiobook. I've been listening to that on 2 times the speed. I've been really enjoying it, but I'll talk about it in my August wrap-up. Again, talking real fast, my battery's about to die. So that's it for everything that I read in July. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what you guys read all of last month. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, as it really helps my channel. Down in the description box are rep codes for both Hello Lovely Box and Unplugged Book Box, and underneath that are links to my Goodreads, my Twitter, and my Instagram, in case you guys wanted to follow me on any of those. But that's it for me today, guys, so I'll talk to you in my next one. Bye!